Hello and welcome to the Signal Sit Down. You know, I will never forget the first time I went to the National African American History Museum, one of the Smithsonian's here in Washington, D.C. It's right on the mall. It looks like a giant beehive. It doesn't match any of the buildings around it, all of them beautiful and neoclassical and, big marble columns, really uplifting, inspiring, wants you to get involved in American civic virtue and American civic life. This building is not that. And I remember going there for the first time knowing how controversial this museum was, and getting it off the ground, to the building itself, to what's inside the building. And when I went inside, I thought that they had kind of undersold the controversy, because you have a complete Marxist reading of history from the bottom floor, which is where you start, slaves making their way over to the New World, to what would become the United States of America, all the way to the top, to the modern cultural figures that are from the Black community. And so I guess the best example of this was the exhibit towards the top of the museum, towards the top of the main exhibit that they have there, on Black Americans in the legal profession. And of course, there's Thurgood Marshall. There's all sorts of liberal, Democrat, Black lawyers, Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, these types of folks. And in the very little tiny column, like almost angled away from direct viewing sight, is a little picture of Clarence Thomas. Oh, Clarence Thomas is one of the most impactful men, period, on American history in the 20th and 21st centuries. He has restructured the way that the right, that conservatives think about the Constitution through his jurisprudence. They didn't want to celebrate him. Meanwhile, Angela Davis gets all sorts of celebration. Of course, a communist criminal who's a member of the Black Panthers, again, another organization lionized by the museum. You just think to yourself, how in the world is this allowed to be stood up? And that was just a precursor to full-fledged radical wokeism that took place during the Great Awakening, as our guest Mike Gonzalez will tell you about during this episode. I mean, during the Great Awakening, all the people who should have stood up to these academics and these quote-unquote historians and said, no, you're not going to put your Marxist spin on American history, they folded like lawn chairs. If you remember, there was a controversy about the African American History Museum a few years back during the Biden administration, in which the idea of punctuality was a vestige of white supremacy and racism, structural racism, just being on time. In my mind, that is like the most racist idea in the world, but apparently these people were getting away with it. No longer. The Trump administration has been doing a great many things. They've been deporting people. There's the war in Iran. There's tax cuts. There's the Save America Act. With all of that going on, it's easy to lose track of some of these other fights. And one of these fights is reclaiming the Smithsonian's, restoring pride in American culture, in American heritage, and in the idea of American citizenship, and taking that away from the Marxists who run these types of institutions. And they've been waging this war for the last 2 years. They have come out with executive orders, which the Smithsonians have dragged their feet on. They've come out with a report exposing all of the biases within these institutions. And they've just come out with a new executive order, really laying down the law, saying you need to change your attitude. You need to change how you're presenting this history to be factual, to be accurate, or there will be repercussions. And one of the things that the new executive order from July lays out is that outside of all these museums, there's going to be signs saying there needs to be a review of this content. The Smithsonians have been ordered to change this content to be in compliance with what we believe to be the proper understanding of American history. This isn't whitewashing American history. This is just getting rid of the Marxism presented there. And there has been someone at the Heritage Foundation who has been following this for a great many years. He knows a ton about the long march to the institutions in several communist countries, in the United States as well. How did so many Marxists get into positions of power here in the United States? And of course, he's been paying special attention to the Smithsonians, and that's Mike Gonzalez. And so with that, without further ado, here is the interview, and we hope you enjoy. Before we get into this week's interview on the Signal Sit Down, Ring that bell to get notifications on future Signal Sit Down content. Hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you may be joining us. And then while you're at it, please leave us a 5-star review and comment who you'd like to see on a future episode of the Signal Sit Down. Remember, it's your government. It's your country. And together, we're taking it back. Without further ado, here's the interview. Mike Gonzalez, welcome to the Signal Sit Down.
Bradley, it's an honor to be here.
And it's a pleasure to have you because you have been on something that has gone under the radar for a lot of people. It's not gone under the radar for the Trump administration. They've taken a lot of action on it.
Right.
But people might not know that the Trump administration is fighting a war for American heritage and American history in the Smithsonian museums.
Right.
You have been on this issue longer than the second Trump administration and Trump 2.0. First and foremost, what's the current issue with our Smithsonian museums?
So actually, let me just tell you I have no qualms about calling this a civilizational crusade. It has been led very smartly, I would say, by the men and women who work in the Trump administration. The administration is a group of many people. The Trump administration has a lot of intelligent people at the top. I would, for example, name Russ Vought at the head of OMB, Vince Haley as the head of the Domestic Policy Council at the White House, obviously Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance. And what they're doing is they're trying to do a long march through the institutions in reverse. And that's perhaps the best place to start. But since you asked the question about the museums, let me answer that. The museums, the Smithsonian is the world's largest museum complex. It has 19 museums that are in existence, 2 others that have been authorized that should never be built. They should have no place on the mall, and that's the Women's Museum and the Latino Museum. The National Museum of the American Latino should never be built. And they have been taken over by a cadre of individuals who see museums and the culture, and I'm quoting them directly. I'm not paraphrasing them. I'm quoting them directly. See museum work as instruments of societal change, as instruments of social change, and of social justice. And they were thrust forward at the height of the Great Awakening between 2019 and 2021. A lot of them got promoted, including Lonnie Bunch III, the head honcho at the Smithsonian Institution. His official title is secretary, and including Anthea Hardig, the director of the National Museum of American History. Both of these were promoted to their roles in 2019 at the height of the Great Awakening, and they want to use these museums for their ideological as their playthings for their ideological agenda. There's a more traditional, time-tested role for national museums, and that is to preserve and transmit to future generations the culture and heritage of a country. These things do not get passed on in the bloodstream. They need to be taught to every generation. National museums play a large role in that. But these people, these leaders, do not see it that way, and they need to be fired. They need to be replaced.
So when did you plug into this issue? When did this first come across your desk and you said, this is a live issue, this is a big deal, especially when you hear the head honchos of the Smithsonian Institution, Lonnie Bunch, Anthea Hardig, all of these leaders say these are vehicles for us to push an ideological agenda, to change society in the ways that we want to see it changed, rather than something that preserves our heritage, rather than something that preserves the civilization.
And transmit to future generations.
Right. In order for you to actually be educated in a way that makes you fitting for a Republican regime, you don't want it to be ideological. You need it to be well-rounded and all-encompassing. So when did you get plugged into this issue?
Well, I've written a few books on the long march through the institutions. The long march through the institutions refers, this is a phrase people attribute it to Antonio Gramsci, the founder of the Italian Communist Party, but it's actually Rudi Dutschke, who was this East German criminal, who was a disciple of one of the philosophers of the Frankfurt School, Herbert Marcuse, who said what we need to have is, but he meant by that is takeover of the cultural institutions. They had arrived at the understanding, which is not necessarily wrong, that the worker refused to be cannon fodder in the Marxist struggle to overturn society, because the worker, in their view, had bought into the hegemonic narrative of their oppressor, of the oppressing class.
Boy, that's convenient.
and for example, Marx believed in getting rid of four things: the family, God, the nation state, and private property. And there were very few revolts between him writing the manifesto in 1848 and in 1917 Bolshevik Revolution. Very few revolts. And why? Because the worker actually liked his family. He liked his wife and children, or in the case of women were working already. Working class women were working. He liked his property. He didn't have enough property, but he wanted to have more of it. The worker worshipped God. He was not atheist. He did not want to get rid of God. He didn't believe with Nietzsche that God was dead. And the worker was patriotic. Even if he lived in a large empire like the Ottoman Empire or the Austrian Empire, he believed in this small country. He believed he loved the place where he was born and his region. So he had patriotic love. So the Marxists then in the 1920s say the worker has bought into. In fact, the oppressor no longer needs to oppress. The worker is oppressing himself with these beliefs. We have to dispel these beliefs. We have to take over the cultural institutions. And Gramsci was foremost in making this argument. Then Gramsci first is translated, people don't realize this, is really fully translated into English in 1970. One of the best translators of Gramsci, by the way, is a man by the name of Joe Buttigieg. That name may sound familiar to you.
It does indeed.
The father of the former transportation secretary, Pete Buttigieg.
Really?
So Pete Buttigieg goes on TV and says, my immigrant father, and you get this idea of a guy with a lunch pail going to the factory. But I ask you, Bradley, what is the factory in South Bend?
They don't exist anymore.
Well, what is it?
Yeah, it's the university.
It's Notre Dame.
Yes.
The big factory in South Bend is Notre Dame, where this man was an emeritus, was a professor, was the dean of one of the schools. Joe Buttigieg did not work, was not a lathe operator. He was the dean of one of the schools in Notre Dame, and he was the founder of the Antonio Gramsci Society. And Joe Buttigieg is learning all these things as a kid. So it's then from 1970 on that they actually begin to take over the institutions. One of these cultural institutions is a museum. Mm-hmm. Museums are fantastic places. As a kid, I lived in Madrid. My mother used to take me to El Prado, was Spain's national museum. I didn't like it then. I was she would say, which room do you like best? And I said, well, that one, because the couches were more comfortable. I was just a snot kid. A snotty kid. But actually, I thank her now because it made me appreciate museums. If I'm in a city and I travel constantly, I go to the museum.
Gosh, that's such a good point. Go to the museums when you're traveling around the country.
Completely, yeah.
Yeah. And it'll tell you so much about, there's a little museum just across the river in Alexandria. It's just a little local Alexandria museum.
Those are great museums.
And they're
fantastic museums. Local museums are great.
So much about the place where you might just stroll across the river to have dinner every once in a while.
Right, exactly.
And it gives a perspective of living historically, of being connected to what has come before you, and wanting to preserve that little museum.
Bradley,
of course, the neighborhood.
You're 100% right. Yeah. I remember with my family traveling in the Chesapeake, we went to Cambridge and went to a local museum, and it had the history of how it had been started with 30 families when Scotland lost the Battle of Culloden to England and they got indentured servants, and they were sent to Cambridge on the Chesapeake, and to build a town, and then they were freed. 10 years later, 20 years later, I don't know, and it had this history, and you really got to understand this little town on the Chesapeake.
Yeah, and it's those places have to survive if the American identity is going to survive.
This is
those
exactly
communities
right.
have to survive. The message that you should get up and go where you're told. If the economic opportunity is in New York City, go there. Of course, there is a degree of truth in that.
We've always been a very mobile society.
We live in a very mobile society, but we can't abandon those things.
No.
Permanent things, of course.
No, we can't.
So what you've laid out here is that this has been a long plot by the Marxists to take over these cultural institutions.
Yes.
When did this make its way to Washington, D.C.? When did it make its way into the Smithsonian's, which, I went to the Air and Space Smithsonian with its new renovation.
Right.
Really nice museums. These are supposed to be the things that when people make the trek to the Imperial City that everyone has access to, right? It's a part of our a part of our civic religion. I mean, if you're in Washington, D.C., to visit these places and to kind of pay homage to all of the great Americans who have lived. And to learn about those lives so that we can hopefully replicate those lives and keep our country afloat.
Exactly. Absolutely right.
When did this get to the Smithsonian's?
Well, in the case of Anthony Hardig and the aforementioned Anthony Hardig and Lonnie Bunch, they were both promoted to their jobs in 2019. And that really is the tumult. Black Lives Matter is founded on 2013. The Ferguson riots, when Black Lives Matter really gels. Ferguson riots is 2014. And we have the Ferguson effect in cities where Black Lives Matter is progressively rioting. And then you have the 1619 Project in 2019. And then the what was happening is that the stewards of our great cultural institutions lost their nerve and surrendered. They threw in the towel. They believed, or they feigned to believe that America is systemically racist, that America is structurally oppressive. And they began to act on those beliefs, which are lies, by the way. I was not born in this country, and I have lived at least a year in 7 countries, all over Latin America, Asia, and Europe. I was a foreign correspondent for many years, 11 of them with the Wall Street Journal, the 10 of them because I was also in New York, and then with the Wires for also 5 or 6 years overseas. I can tell you, I can compare and contrast as a result of me being able to, having lived so many places. This is the freest place on earth, for heaven's sakes. In case anybody needs to get the memo, let me write the memo right now. The reason why we have so many people knocking on our doors is because this is an unheard of, ahistorical experiment in freedom, in wealth creation, and people flock here for that reason. We're by no means structurally oppressive. We're not systemically racist. They are ugly racists in our society, just like there are ugly racists in France and Greenland and Patagonia and South Africa and Thailand and Peru. It's unfortunately that we as humans have these bad chips, but we're not systemically racist. But the leaders of these institutions began to act on these things, on these ideas, and so they promoted a very leftist man, a leftist revolutionary, Lonnie Bunch III, as the head of the Smithsonian. And people was like, "Oh, I just saw Lonnie Bunch on TV. He's a really, very soft-spoken, great guy." Yeah, he's a winning, jovial guy, but he actually tied the Smithsonian to the 1619 Project. He tied the Smithsonian from the very beginning. He was the founding director of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, appointed under Obama, and he tied it from the very beginning. He sent out his curators to collect trash that rioters left behind in the streets of Ferguson, because he thought these were historic talisman that needed to be saved for Americans. So he he actually oversaw the trashing of our great national jewel, which is the Smithsonian Institution. So they appointed this.
There's something appropriate about the folks collecting trash from Black Lives Matter and telling you that those are things worth preserving in our country these days.
Exactly, and they did it again in 2020.
Right?
They did it again in 2020. This time when he was head of the whole institution. And Anthea Hardig, again, a woman with, I testified next to her in July twice, once sitting next to her. And I was calling her for her to be fired. And she was sitting right next to me at a congressional hearing in the House. She's incredibly woke. Incredibly woke. Gives a land acknowledgement. Every time she gets up to speak, she was asked, would you consider giving your house to the original tribe? And she thought that was not pertinent to the issue. She also always talks about, apologizes for her white privilege. But you know what she did, Bradley? When she started both these hearings alongside me, she said, my name is Anthea Hardig. My family has been contributing to this country since the Revolutionary War.
Uh-oh.
So she
that's a comment that if a right-winger says it, they get in trouble with all sorts of labels.
She apologizes for her white privilege, but she was dealing that card from the top of the pack.
Of course.
Trying to come off as, hey, I'm this heritage American. It was an unbelievable thing to see.
What an irony.
It shows the hypocrisy of these people.
Of course. And I mean, what an irony. I mean, it would be funny if it wasn't so sick that you have people running around Washington, D.C., being in control of this, saying, yes, the trash is what we should collect and pass on to our posterity.
Right.
I mean, what a terrible mindset to have when going about creating these things. And
we have great American artifacts.
We have so many great American artifacts. And you said that Lonnie Bunch III, the current secretary of the Smithsonian Institution,
right?
Secretary. What a silly. It's like a cabinet position now. No, I'm teasing. But
no,
he is the guy who was in charge of the African American History Museum.
The guy who founded it. Yeah,
the guy who founded it.
Yeah, the founding director.
That was a disaster. That entire time that museum was trying to get off the ground, it looks like this giant beehive on the National Mall.
It's an eyesore.
It is an eyesore. You go inside, it tells you all these insane things about how there was actually no such thing as whiteness and blackness until some racists came along and decided they wanted to impress the world with this. And then you go all the way up the stairs and you learn about, because you start in the basement floor, right? The basement floor is when the slaves are coming over to the New World. That's the 1619 version of American history. And you proceed your way up the stairs to these different exhibits where you experience more modern figures in American history that are black. And you get to an area where it's black lawyers and judges, and it's all Thurgood Marshall. And then in the very tiny little corner, they say like, oh yeah, and Clarence Thomas was here at one point too.
And that was not there to begin with.
Yeah, it wasn't there to begin with. Somebody had to
only
push him
after we hollered.
Yeah.
They had, so I counted one photo of him and 6 of Angela Davis, the communist who bought the gun with which the Black Panther shot a judge in Marin County, California. She was on the FBI most wanted list. She is lionized at that museum with 5 or 6 pictures. Clarence Thomas gets one.
Yeah, the point I'm getting at is it's a curation disaster. It was a disastrous project from the start. How did this person fail upwards?
He didn't fail upward. He is the whole, I just wrote a column on this, the whole museum industrial complex, the funders, the accrediting institutions, the historical associations, the universities, the professions. If you look at, they have done studies on this, a very good Verdon Lab study done 10 years ago on the different professions that have to do with museums, curators, conservators, art historians, etc. They're all like 90, so they judge them according to party donations. They're like 96, 97% liberal. And they're like 2% conservative. So this whole museum industrial complex thrust these people forward in the Great Awakening, and they broke through. This is not something that happens out of nowhere in 2019, don't get me wrong. this has been building up. Obama gets elected in 2000. By the way, the country was really united in 2008. The country was happy. The people thought, if you go back and look at surveys, people thought relations between the races were great. And Obama comes in 2008, and all of a sudden takes a nosedive, and Black Lives Matter happens, and and Obama says about his son who looked like Trayvon Martin. How is that? What a silly thing to say, by the way. I'm originally my parents were born in Cuba. My ancestors were born in Spain. I was born in Cuba. Nobody looks like me. Thank God.
Don't sell yourself short, Mike.
No, I'm like, no, but this idea of someone who looks like me. Who the heck looks like me? No. I wish I could say I could boast that I look like Ricky Ricardo. I just don't.
So I think that's a great point, though. It's not so much failing upward. They are having the desired intent. They are having the desired effect that this cultural takeover has wanted.
Right.
And now he's in this position of authority. The Great Awakening, as you've called it, happens. Everyone who could have checked the Smithsonian's power and the Smithsonian's rewriting of history folds like a lawn chair.
Falls like a lawn chair.
And
a cheap lawn chair.
Yeah, that's right. It was a cheap lawn chair. I got that directly from your column that I read on thedailysignal.com. Go check it out if you haven't yet. But he folds they all fold like cheap lawn chairs. And then you get the second Trump administration. What is the second Trump administration doing to restore American history and American civilization through the Smithsonian's in the 250th year of America?
They've actually, it's a long march in reverse. They had very early on, in March of 2025, there was an EO, an executive order restoring sanity, and ordering the Smithsonian to do the things that it needed to do in order to have an objective. The main thing with the Smithsonian, by the way, because doesn't really have great art, the indoctrination comes to what's called the didactics and the wall texts. The wall text, you walk into an exhibition in a room and you'll see a long wall text, maybe this size, that will give you an explanation of what you're going to see in that exhibition. And then next to each exhibit, you have didactics, which are this size. And it's through the wall text and through the didactics that the indoctrination takes place. For example, you were referencing the African American Museum. One of the worst things they do is they completely magnify the importance of slavery to the U.S. economy from the 1830s and 40s and 50s on, says that it accounts for 50% of the American economy. Why would they do that? Because they want to denigrate capitalism. And in fact, the 1619 Project does. The 1619 Project makes the same mistake. It's apparently, they have multiplied the real value of King Cotton to the U.S. economy by 10. It was about 5% of GDP in the late 30s, the 1830s. But they want to smear all of capitalism, say that capitalism results from slavery. So, these things, that museum is there to shame Americans, but we should all feel bad about slavery. Let me make that clear. None of us had anything to do with it, obviously, but slavery is still practiced around the world, including in Mayor Zoran Mamdani's native country of Uganda.
Right.
He's very concerned about giving reparations in New York, but what about fixing your native country where slavery is practiced today? So these things begin to happen slowly, but come to fruition really with, as I said, the Great Awakening, when the Stewarts folded.
And they had another hardcore executive order that just came out in July to try to continue to beat back this wave of
that's where I was
progressivism.
going. The Trump administration then tries to reverse that with the March EO. Then Smithsonian does nothing about it. Then in August, the administration comes back and says, we're going to do an audit. We're going to do an audit. We need this stuff from you. They need this and this and this. We're going to start with these 8 museums. We'll get to the other 13 later. And the Smithsonian could have very easily contributed to the audit. It just chose not to. It chose not to send in the material, which would have been very easy for them to have done. And so the administration then came back in December of last year, 2025, and said, "Looky here, you're not doing anything. We've asked you to do this," and Lonnie Bunch, and they continue to kick, as the Brits say, kick the ball into the long grass, and then what happened on 4th of July is that the Domestic Policy Council, led by Vince Haley, came out with what I thought was a very good report, 163 pages, 500 endnotes.
Oh yeah,
including a reference to one of my books, my book with the great Katie Gorka.
What's the title of that book?
Next Gen Marxism.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, my latest book, and then they and this is where we are right now. Then after that, the administration comes out with a new EO that says we're going to put in signs by the Smithsonian saying the things you're going to see inside here are completely subjective and do not tell. There's not a faithful rendering of American heritage,
which is so. I mean, it's just a chef's kiss the whole way around, because that executive order that came out in mid-July does two things predominantly. The first is the Smithsonians aren't doing enough to celebrate America 250 and honor the signers of the Declaration of Independence. We're forcing you to do that now. That was great. The second part of it, and I got it on my phone here because I think it's so funny. The Secretary of the Interior, acting through the Director of the National Park Service and in coordination with the Assistant to the President for Domestic Policy, shall install temporary signage along the NPS-maintained sidewalks and walkways used by the public to access the museum, informing visitors of the finding of the report, that being the White House report that came out on 4th of July,
right,
and of the policy set forth in Section 1 of this order. Such signage shall notify visitors that the museum exhibits should be renovated consistent with the findings in the report and direct visitors to locations and resources for accurate information regarding America's history. Boom. I mean, what a mic drop. This is so funny because I remember I was just talking to one of my friends about your work in the Smithsonian problems that we've been having when they were out visiting me in Washington, D.C., and we were going to some of these Smithsonians, and they just said, I'm so glad that the Trump administration is doing it because they are from Chicago and they remember when, after the Great Awakening, everything in the Field Museum, especially their Egypt exhibit and their Native American exhibit, everything got covered up. And there was all these signs saying, sorry, this exhibit is closed. We're currently reevaluating the historical standards by which we judge what information we're presenting to the public. And so to have...
Where was this? Chicago.
This was at the Field Museum in Chicago. And so to have this message, to have that done in reverse to them is, I'm getting a little bit of schadenfreude.
Right. Of course, very silly people in the Senate of both parties have now written a letter to the administration saying, what are you talking about? What authority does Doug Burgum have to put this signage? And we haven't seen the White House response yet as of this conversation right now.
Yeah, there's nothing more they love. There's nothing more than post offices that get named by those institutions anymore, I think. So, if they want to vote on more signs, I guess they can vote on more signs. Well, of course they can put up a sign. This is ridiculous. You've talked about the Great Awakening in connection with the Smithsonian issue, but I want to talk one thing, current events, before we go. And that is, over the week, a few weeks ago now, AOC has come out and said, woke one, a little crazy, which means that woke two is upon us. And I'm trying to figure out exactly what woke two is and how it's different than woke one. I'm wondering if you have thoughts on a second Great Awakening that might be coming our way.
I think this is actually, it just happened yesterday, the day previous to the day we're taping. She just said this, very fresh on my mind. She actually said woke one was crazy. Just two things here. There are many things, but two main things. First, she's lying. All of woke is going to be bad. All of woke is going to be woke 1, woke 2 is like thing 1, thing 2 in Dr. Seuss. So she's lying about that. But number 2, this is actually a moment, Bradley. Milton Friedman used to say that the important thing is not the individual politicians, but the climate of opinion. If the climate of opinion was wrong, even a good politician would do the wrong thing. And if the climate of opinion, if you changed it, you made it good, you made it right, even the bad politician would do the right thing. And we've seen this. We had a good man, Richard Nixon, who was good as in the House in the 1940s and 50s, who was a good vice president, doing horrible things as president because the climate of opinion was bad. He said, we're all Keynesians now. He became a believer in deficit spending. And then you had, by contrast, after Reagan, you had Bill Clinton, a bad politician, saying the era of big government is over, signing the welfare bill, which was written in this building right here by one of our colleagues who's still here.
Yeah.
And saying,
Mr. Rector.
Yeah. So that's a prime example of how the climate of opinion is important. AOC, bless her heart, saying that woke 1 was crazy is a sign that we've gotten somewhere. That we've gotten somewhere in changing the climate of opinion. Because one of the leading lights, if you can use that term, of wokeism.
It's a low bar.
Yeah. It's saying, no, this stuff was crazy, man. This stuff we were talking about was completely crazy. So even if she doesn't believe in woke 2, it's going to be the same thing with different marketing. It shows you that wokeism, that the American people have woken up.
Yeah.
And said...
A different kind of woke. Yeah.
Yeah, the American people have woken up and saying, no, we don't really like this stuff.
Yeah. So what is, and this will be the final question that I have for you. I am a skeptic and a pessimist by nature, so I'm thinking, oh gosh, woke 2. I think it's totally right to point out the reason that woke 1 is dead is because hardworking Americans all across the country killed it. Yeah. And that's progress. That's a great thing. And so I need to keep that in mind. This
institution played a role.
Everyone.
This institution played a role.
Absolutely.
In 2021, I traveled to 30 cities. Jonathan Butcher did the same thing, talking about critical race theory. 2022, another 30 cities. Jonathan Butcher, I got COVID 4 times.
You're setting records.
I spoke in Loudoun County with Ground Zero for the Reconquista, where the fight began, and they elected Youngkin that November. That was the first watermark.
It was the first domino to fall. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then Trump in 2024. So this is the American people.
Yeah.
Stood up and said no.
It's important to keep the positive message in mind. But
this is a wonderful.
Yes, but the pessimist in me. Okay, if you were a double agent and they hired you and said, "We need to find our way back. Woke 2 needs to come." You just said it's how are they going to market it, right? What is the way that they climb back out of this hole? What should the average American at home listening to this be watching for signs that woke 2 is rearing its ugly head, and I need to get active in my school board or things like that.
Well, no, we're always going to see that's just lipstick on a pig. That pig.
We've seen the pig already.
Yeah, we've seen the pig. They're putting lipstick on it. You know what? It's not gonna. That pig is not gonna pass. For anything. We'll see it. But I don't mean to be triumphalist. This is not mission accomplished. They're coming back. They want to. They're very persistent. We have to be equally persistent. This is why the election this year is really important, and the election in 2028 is really important, because if we have the president who gets elected in 2028 of either party understands that we cannot bring woke back, then it may be that the long march in reverse is permanent. But if the new president that gets into the White House January 2029 wants to become Biden 2.0, then the best we're going to have is just a ping pong back and forth. And what society can live like that?
No, I don't think I wouldn't be long that situation. Yeah. And as you said, you need to create good public opinion that surrounds our politics.
Right. And this is not a party dependent thing. I could see a Republican getting in and winning in 2028 and saying, no, I don't want to do the culture wars. In the writing, the culture was being contemptuous of what the Trump administration has accomplished. And I can see a Democrat coming in and saying, no, this is a failed experiment. Let's move away. Let's move forward. So this is not a party-dependent thing.
So we are going to keep an eye on everything Smithsonian's, everything woke too. But for now, we'll keep everything you said in mind. Mike Gonzalez, thank you for coming on the Signal Sit Down.
Thank you, Bradley. This went by really fast. It was very enjoyable. Thank you.
Every state is home to significant historic sites that tell the American story. But not every site is telling that story honestly and fairly. That's why the Heritage Foundation created the Heritage Guide to Historic Sites. This interactive guide equips American citizens with the tools they need to enjoy the sites that depict some of the greatest moments in our nation's history, analyzing them for historical accuracy, and provides resources for families or educators planning a visit. From Mount Vernon to Independence Hall to Gettysburg and more, Americans deserve transparency, and sites that steward our history faithfully deserve our gratitude. The Heritage Guide to Historic Sites invites every American to rediscover the places and stories that define our nation, whether it's across the country or in your backyard. Visit historicsites.heritage.org to start your adventure today.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Signal Sit Down. If you liked what you heard here today, be sure to hit like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever before you go. And we love your feedback. It really does help the show. So please remember to leave us a review and comment who you'd like to see on future episodes of the Signal Sit Down. It's because of your support and your interest and your engagement that allows us to continue this incredibly fun work. And together, we'll continue to expose how Washington really works and affect real change. We'll see you next time on the Signal Sit Down.